Hey everybody, it's James Lindsay and you are listening to New Discourses Bullets, where I give you a short bullet point-like summary of a single topic from wokeness that we need to know so we can stop it. And I want to read to you today from the Communist Manifesto. Not a lot of it, just the first paragraph of the first chapter. So just a little snippet, because what I want to talk about is that Marxism, or Marxian, in fact, anything derived from Marx, any militant ideology and activism, theory and praxis derived from Marx, has two operational goals. It's not that there's one operational goal, which is to have a revolution and take over society, seize the means of production, and so on. There are two possible outcomes that are satisfactory to the Marxists. Marx believed this was actually so intrinsic to the nature of human reality that one or the other of these would always follow from the attempt of revolution, and that the attempt for revolution will always emerge from the present state of class-conflicted society. His whole point with the Communist Manifesto is that the socialist state is a kind of like escape from the trajectory of class conflict to lead humanity and history to an end point where there is no more class conflict, a stateless, classless society where everybody has plenty, and it is from each according to their abilities and to each according to their needs, as you famously heard. But the revolution that we always hear about, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. David Horowitz, who recently died, taught us about radical movements. It turns out that they have two acceptable states. And this applies not just to Marxism, it applies to every derivative of Marxism as well. That can include woke on the left, neo-Marxism, cultural Marxism, critical Marxism, intersectionality or intersectional Marxism, which is really kind of almost woke, right? It's almost. Woke is one step further down the evolutionary track, but it also applies to reactionary movements that have adopted Marxist tactics and elements of Marxist analysis without realizing that they're onboarding the ideology. And so I will now read to you the first paragraph of Chapter 1 of the Communist Manifesto. There's a preface before this. It's pretty short and very famous. I'm skipping that. So if anybody wants to say, James said it's on the first page and it's not, it's the first page of the first chapter. It's the first paragraph of the first chapter. And that chapter 1, is titled Bourgeois and Proletarians, and it runs like this. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. Okay? Like I said, he thinks it is the definition, this teleological project of the evolution of society, is the definition of history. Okay? And the definition of history is class struggles. All history is the history of class struggles. Okay? And then he gives some examples. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman. In a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight. A fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. And so there are the two possible outcomes, the two goals of Marxism. They want the revolution if they can get it, but they will take common ruin or total destruction if they cannot. It's very important we understand that, because everything they do strategically will be set up to capture what they can and kill what they cannot. Very important to understand. So in a word, he says this history that defines all of history, the history of class struggles, is a fight carried on between oppressor class versus oppressed class. And you have to understand that the class definition is absolutely intrinsic. So when you hear people say on the woke right, say that we need to import the class analysis of Marx, This is actually what they're talking about. It's not how the classes are structured, it is how the classes relate to one another, which is intrinsically in conflict with one another, and that conflict is intrinsically defined as oppressor versus oppressed. It's not whether there is oppression in the world or not. It's not whether the South African Boers are oppressed by their Marxist government or race Marxist government right now. They are oppressed. It's not whether or not the U.S. colonists were oppressed by King George III at the founding of the U.S., they were oppressed, or at least repressed, maybe oppressed. But that's not the point. The point isn't a question. Marx isn't saying sometimes oppression exists and somebody should do something about it. That's not Marx's analysis. Marx's analysis is that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, which are, in a word, oppressor and oppressed standing in constant opposition to one another and carrying out a constant, uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, such that that fight always ends either in the revolutionary reconstitution of society or in the common ruin of the contending classes. So here's one reason that the American founding fathers were not woke. They did not believe that their revolution ended in one of those two ways, or that that's how history itself is defined. They knew that if they were to succeed in the American Revolution, there would be a revolutionary reconstitution of their society, but not all of society. Britain would go on being Britain, and the U.S. would go on being independent of Britain. That's completely different. The whole society didn't get reconstituted. Britain just lost its colonies. And secondly, they had no illusions that if they couldn't win the revolution, that it would be the common ruin of all, that the Americas and Britain would collapse as a result of their attempted revolution. Marx has a very specific formulation. They're going to take everything or destroy it. And when I say everything, I mean everything. So a war for independence, even if we call it a revolution or a revolutionary war, a war for independence is not the same thing. It's fundamentally different. Okay? But the point I want to focus on is the two end points that Marx gives. I don't want to get bogged down in these, other tangential arguments. The two endpoints are that they are going to have the revolution, and the goal of the revolution is to seize the means of production of the total of society so that they can guide it according to their principles. And I didn't say socialist principles or Marxist principles here, although that is the goal for the communist, because Marx believed this happened from free man versus slave to patrician versus plebeian, to lord versus serf. These are different stages he saw in history, to guildmaster and journeyman. He saw different stages in history that culminate in the capitalist era with bourgeois versus proletarian. So the move from the aristocracy that was the previous stage for Marx into the capitalist system that is the current stage when he was writing, and to this day, that also required a revolution in Marx's view. But in particular, the goal for the Marxist is that there is a correct way to order society that will solve all the problems that are generated by the class conflict model, and that they're going to seize the means of production to enact that. For Marx, and then for Lenin after him, socialism is actually setting up a semi-state that is doing away with itself. Of course, this is a fantasy. But fascism makes the same error. It believes that it can create a perfectly ordered state. Now, granted, it will be all kinds of oppressive because fascism believes oppression makes the system work. Communism does not believe oppression makes the system work. They understand that it is a necessary function of a state in order to purge its enemies. So they take on that aspect, but their goal, allegedly, is still to get rid of the state. There's a ton here. This is a short podcast, so I'm not going to go down on that tangent. But I want you to understand that what this means in practice for simpler things than all of society. If you have a radical militant Marxian, in other words, derived from Marxism or Marxist class analysis, etc. If you have a radical militant Marxian movement, and this includes both woke left and woke right in our present day, attacking your institution, they have two win conditions. One is the revolutionary reconstitution of the institution they're going after. In other words, they seize control of it. And the other is, if they cannot seize control, the common ruin of the contending classes, which means they're going to destroy it. It's incredibly important that you understand that all of their operations are geared to achieve either of these two ends. They are more than happy to get either one. They will take the revolution if they can get it, but destruction is always a backup plan. So we're going to radically remake the police, for example. We all just lived through 5 years of this nonsense. We're going to radically remake the immigration system. We're living through this nonsense now. And if we can't, then we'll just break the whole system. We'll get rid of the entire program. We'll get rid of police. We'll burn down police stations. That's what they did, right? So you get the idea. But it's very important to realize, like, people ask me, James, what in the world is their goal? What are they trying to do? And their goal is revolution if they can get it, with total destruction if they fail. If I can't have your stuff, nobody's going to have your stuff, is the best way to put it. What they want to do with it varies depending on the school or the evolutionary species of Marxism we're dealing with, or given a gigantic kind of evolutionary leap in the mimetic space of communism to fascism, same model. They're still going to take over what they can and destroy what they cannot, but they have a completely different program. The left is geared toward radical egalitarianism. The right is geared toward radical hierarchical order and duty, but they're still going to use the same analysis and tactics. And that analysis is the following. This is what it means to be woke, at least sort of. It's part of it. We could do this with other parts of Marx too. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. In a word, between oppressor and oppressed, who stand in constant opposition to one another and carry on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ends either in a revolutionary reconstitution of the society at large or in the common ruin of the contending classes. So the big take home is they want the revolution, they want to take control. Even when they get it, what actually we all see ends is the ruin of everything, because they spend down any capital that they steal when they take things over, because they don't rightly know how to manage things. The fascists have a slight edge on them there. They can manage things a little better as long as there's some kind of financial input coming in. They operate through plunder financially. They can't generate their own wealth because ultimately they're socialist. But they are more than happy to outright destroy anything that resists them. And I think that you've seen that. The struggle session operates this way, right? They visit a struggle session on you, and yeah, maybe they ruin their reputation for being awful to people, but it doesn't matter. That's the common ruin of the contending classes. They're going to either convert you and get you to confess and cry and change your views and do better and so on, or they're going to destroy you. And that's the message today. The Marxists or the woke are always content in every case, if they can't get the revolution, to destroy the thing that they're trying to take. So when a Marxist incursion comes on your institution or whatever it happens to be, you have to basically fight for your life, because they're more than happy to destroy you if they can't convert you. If you're a coward and craven and they do convert you, they'll throw you out and take over your thing and wear it, as the saying goes, like a skin suit. So you're not going to win by giving in, but you're going to have to fight to make sure that they cannot result in your ruin in the process, which again, I urge you to understand. A, they're very happy to achieve, and B, they have arranged the incursion itself such that your ruin is likely as an outcome if they can't take things over. At which point they get to position themselves as the savior or the rescuer who saves you from yourself. But of course,